So for our final lecture, for our final piece of content for Western Europe, we're going to look at an era that's commonly referred to as the Industrial Revolution. Now, this really is the second biggest change in human history. The first big change in human history is when we shifted from a hunting and gathering society to a farming society. That was thousands of years ago. This is along those same lines. So we first examine how it all began, and specifically we point towards England. Now, England implemented many agricultural innovations that helped increase yields with fewer workers, and what that means is growing more food with fewer farmhands. Jethro Tull invented what was called the seed drill, and you can see a picture of it here. And it was designed to increase productivity. Manure is used as fertilizer more often. The plows are lighter, and animals are selectively bred. More food with less need for workers, even though families are still having children as if they need farm workers. All right, this means that they're going to need something to do. So farming improvements will lead to industrialization. Now the question becomes, why Great Britain? Why is it that this tiny island in the North Atlantic took the lead in industrializing? Now, it did center in Britain, but it was definitely not planned, and it unfolded in a rather spontaneous manner. All right, there were a few clear advantages that they had. When we see this idea of abundance of resources, there are plenty of deposits of coal and iron in the British Isles. So that's something that's helpful. It's close to water. Obviously, it's an island, so you have many towns and cities that have good harbors. All right, so you can get your goods to market. Within the empire, they have colonies in North America, the Caribbean, and India, and they had access to the American windfall of food, profits, and calories. You know, the trade and commerce between England and her empire also enjoy the protection of the Royal Navy. So that means that goods are protected. Now, the other thing to consider is the fact that they are an island, so while they're industrializing, Napoleon tried invading, Napoleon failed. So they don't necessarily have to deal with all of the strife that continental Europe does. You factor in the laws designed to protect business owners, it means that England is more than positioned to take the lead. Now, two main things that we see occurring as part of this revolution are quicker travel, quicker communication. You can definitely argue that the age of steam and iron was launched in 1765 when James Watt, seen here, invented the world's first workable steam engine. Now, he built upon his earlier experiments with steam pumps, and his new machine was powered by coal, which we've seen it's in abundance in England. Coal production actually increased tenfold between 1750 and 1850. So the steam engine comes first, and then it's applied to inventions like railroads. By 1850, every nation that was industrialized, or at least wanted to become industrialized, was building railroads. Great Britain's railroad growth leveled off at about 20,000 miles by the 1870s, so they peaked early. While Germany, France, Canada, and Russia did end up building more lines than Britain. The Japanese actually were very industrious, and they started by importing US and British engineers to begin the process. Now, once Japan trained their own engineers, they sent these men home. But the rails reached every single province and city in Japan by the 20th century, the U.S. takes the cake. All right, by the end of the Civil War, the United States had 35,000 miles of track and almost 400,000 by World War I, longer than the next 7 longest networks combined. Now, due to the presence of the railroads, cities are going to double in size. They need to accommodate the tracks, the warehouses, repair shops, and other aspects of the industry. Railroads are also going to require bridges, tunnels, and embankments in the countryside. Vast quantities of timber were used for rail ties and bridges, and they would often consume entire forests. New land will be opened up to agriculture, mining, and other exploitation of natural resources. So it's not just the railroads that affect the land. All right, it's all of the other industries that go along with it. The railroad, without a doubt, epitomizes the industrial spirit of the age. Communication is much quicker because of telegraph cables. Now, these were laid on the Atlantic floor in 1866, and Europe was connected to India. Again, telegraph cables laid on the ocean floor connects India by 1870, and the developed world is connected by the 1880s. It gets to a point where by the turn of the century, by 1900, every country and every inhabited island is connected. Cables are critical tools of modern shipping and business, and the press actually referred to them, leading to this annihilation of time and space. So we can travel quicker, we can communicate quicker. It begins in England, and it begins to spread. Now, what are the effects of this process? All right, if something works for one area, it's going to spread out to others. It begins with coal and iron, but it spreads out to steel, chemicals, electricity. The United States eventually led the world in steel production, producing 10 million tons per year by 1900. But Germany still produces 8 million and England 5 million tons. Chemical production was most prominent in Germany, where they actually set up schools for science and engineering. The biggest game changer is definitely electricity. All right, and by the late 1800s, cities are starting to light up their theaters and public squares. Electric lighting is going to replace a lot of the smelly gas lamps of most cities of Europe and North America by 1900. It's also going to allow cities to eliminate congestion above the ground by moving transportation below the ground with subways. So here's where we see that, yes, this is another transportation example of where you can get from point A to point B quicker, more efficiently. Now, the increase of the factory system is kind of the beginning of the end of using skilled labor en masse. The concept of factories not hiring means they're not hiring skilled labor. Unskilled laborers are more desirable when it comes to running machines because they can easily be replaced. And children were even used to help families earn a living. Child labor was something that happened because families, unfortunately, needed it to happen. They needed them to work to make ends meet. Now, this is certainly going to affect society. Middle and upper class women, when you see sharp gender roles, middle and upper class women are expected to turn their home into a paradise for their husbands so that their husbands can escape the drudgery of industrial life. They're going to entertain, take care of the home, and hire servants to help with their children. There is a new middle class that's going to emerge that consists of bankers and engineers, shopkeepers, doctors, entrepreneurs. They're going to start to distinguish themselves from the working class, those who use their hands to make their living. And unfortunately, the lower class, the working classes, are going to be crammed into unhealthy cities that are teeming with cholera and other diseases and unsafe living conditions as well. Interestingly enough, in 1851, A majority of Britons lived in cities. More of them lived in cities than in the country for the first time in history. That starts a demographic shift that certainly continues to this day. These are some of the more visible effects of the so-called Industrial Revolution.